Hey folks, I'm Steve Butler. Do you love the great outdoors? Do you still dream about the one that got away? Well, you're going to love today's episode. We're building a landing net and a fishing lure. Come see how we do it in the garage. Okay, let's have a look at today's projects. The first thing we're going to build is this landing net. It consists of a wooden handle and 3 pieces of 1/8-inch thick material that gets laminated and bent around a form. And then we attach this netting. The second thing we're going to build, and I love collecting these old-time wooden lures, and we're going to build one just like the surface popper lure, only we're going to use off-the-shelf 3/4-inch thick dowel. Okay, first thing we need to do is get our 1/8-inch strips and bend them around the form. Yeah, my son was given a tackle box full of tackle from a family friend, and we opened it up and it had these beautiful old wooden lures. And I just thought they were great as objects. I thought they'd be a great project for the show, so we added the landing net, and together it worked out really well. The success in creating a great landing net all starts from your form, your bending form. And the size of the form is totally up to you. I picked one that I felt was comfortable, felt good in the hands, and I used 3/4-inch plywood for my platform. I then cut and attached my 3/4-inch bending form. I drilled some holes using a Forstner bit, and those are to accommodate the clamps. The more clamps you have, the better, but you don't want to take away so much material that you jeopardize the integrity of your bending form. Now, we're using 1/8-inch thick strips. I went ahead and cut some ash and some walnut on the table saw. Now, ash is a perfect bending wood. You don't want to go any thinner because you could fracture the wood when you try to bend it around the curve here. And the walnut piece is going to be in the center and just act as an accent. You can use any material you want for that. So, a steam box is great for getting the wood ready to bend. It only takes a couple hours in the steam box. But if you don't have one, you can soak these overnight, or for 24 hours is best. And what you can do is buy some plastic plumber's pipe, an 8-foot length, and just stick your pieces in there and fill it up with water. Make sure it's capped off at both ends. So the first thing we're going to do is get our pieces that I've had soaking overnight, and we're going to attach them to the form, and then we'll let those dry. We're not using any glue right now. Okay, let's go get those pieces. I'm very fortunate. I happen to live on the banks of a river, so I just tied the strips together and threw them in there and let them soak for 24 hours. Just going to haul them out now. Okay, well that anchor worked well, holding them in there. Let's head back to the garage and we'll bend these around the form. Yeah, this is a great project to introduce someone into bent lamination or bending wood around forms. I didn't use a steam box. I'm lucky that I live on a river, so I just threw them in the river, soaked them overnight. You could fill up your tub, put them in there, or whatever. But you don't need a lot of materials or tools to do this project. Okay, you want to move quickly, but not too fast where you make mistakes. You definitely want to take your time bending it around the form, but you don't want these to dry out on you. Now what I did is I marked the center point of each strip, and I'm just going to clamp right at that point, and then we're just going to move around the form gradually and add a clamp. And what I like to do is I'll bend this down, just makes it easier to work with, right at the base. And I'm just going to attach a spring clamp, and now I'll just work away from that. So, now you notice I do not have a backup board on this. And the metal of the clamps might stain a little, but it comes off with a scraper and sanding. We have to sand these anyways afterwards. So, just putting one on each spot. And as this dries, you just want to go around and tighten up the clamps. We're not adding glue at this point. We're just going to let these dry. They're full of water for 24 hours. And then we'll come back, take them out of the clamps, and add some glue. And that's what's permanently going to fix that shape. If you feel better adding a backup board, go ahead. A lot of people will use a little piece of thin aluminum, and it just stops this board from breaking out if there's any grain, loose grain that might break out. So far, I haven't had a need to do so. Now, the reason I'm going in order with my clamps, if I didn't, and I put a clamp there and I put a clamp here, you could get a little bubble or it could lift off the form. And then you have to unclamp it and readjust it. So this keeps it tight against the form as you go along. You also want to make sure it's down on your platform here, or you're going to get a little skewed shape. So 24 hours. You can soak them in the tub. I had them in the river, and it works great. A lot of people will say, you have too many clamps or you have so many clamps. Well, this is why. Imagine a larger form, how many clamps you need. You can never have too many clamps. All right, this is coming along nicely. Just going to tighten this up. We'll put one more here, right across our handle area. There we go. Just going to let that dry for 24 hours. I went ahead yesterday and I did one. So now we're just going to go retrieve that and we'll laminate the strips together.
Yeah, you can use any wood for this project, but there are certain woods that bend better than others, and ash is one of them. It's one of the best woods for bending. And I used a contrast wood in the middle, walnut, and it was backed up by the two pieces of ash. That way it wouldn't split around the form.
Before we continue and do more work on the landing net, we need to make a handle. Now, the design of it is arbitrary. It's entirely up to you. I just drew some lines on a piece of mahogany, and you can use whatever wood you like. If you want a more decorative wood like curly maple, by all means, go ahead. So I'm just going to cut it out on the bandsaw, and we'll sand it later on when the net is finished. Make sure you let the bandsaw come up to speed before you use it. I have some hearing protection on and some eye protection. Okay, let's get started. Okay, that looks great. I decided to make it a little narrower than I originally had planned. Okay, let's go back to the landing net. Okay, let me show you what I did. How I determined how long to cut the strips at, I simply used some blue tape. Now, if you happen to have a garment tape, a fabric tape, it would work even better. And I just wrapped the blue tape around my form, giving myself a little extra to work with. Make sure they don't stick together. And I just cut that off. And now I simply lay it flat on my bench and I'll measure that length, and that's the length I need to cut my strips at. Also, it comes in handy for laying out the drill holes for when you stitch the netting on. If I want 1 inch in between drill holes, I just mark them on here, and then at the end, when my net's made, I apply the tape back on it and just drill right through the tape. I went ahead and I removed the handle portion of our form, and that's where I'm going to put the handle we just made. I attached some two-face tape or double-sided tape to it, and I'm just going to put this right on here. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some wax, and I just want to wax around the form. You don't need copious amounts. Make sure you don't get it on the handle though. And that allows me to laminate the strips around the form and not worry about the strips actually gluing onto the form itself. Okay, I think we're ready to laminate our strips together. Here's a set of strips I did earlier, and they're now dry. Now, there is some spring back, but they pretty much hold the form. So we're just going to apply some glue. Now you have to be very careful. You definitely want to use a waterproof glue, but it's easy to get turned around and put glue on the wrong side. So I do not need to apply glue on the outside strip because it'll have it on our center strip. So I'm just going to go ahead, move these over, and then just start applying my glue to the outside strip. And I'm just going to go along. Other than waiting for these to dry around the form, this is what takes the most time. Okay. Move those out of the way. I made a mark at our center line. I'm just going to slowly bend this around. Get my clamp. That's just going to temporarily hold that in place until I get my next strip done. Same thing, just going to start in the middle, work my way out, turn it in for in, and do the other side. Okay. Apply our second strip. Now you can see why we put wax on that form. Okay, now you want to make sure these are flat on the surface. And like we did previously, I'm just going to go around, add a clamp, go right down until we've clamped the whole thing. You can see that our center walnut contrasting strip is a little wider than the other strips. I want my finished dimension to be 3/4 of an inch. You could trim those down as you're ripping these strips, but I just choose to leave them a little wider, and then I'll just come back with a hand plane and clean them up, just in case some of the pieces break or crack while I'm bending them. Then I have a little more to play with. You might find, don't be alarmed, that because of the moisture in the wood, now these ones are dry, but the moisture in the wood or with the glue, with the metal of the clamps, will stain the wood sometimes. Just scrape it off. But if you want to put a backup board or a piece of metal around this so that doesn't happen, feel free. There we go. You can see how that's coming together. Just going to put some clamps around our handle piece soon once we're done. And the placement of the handle is entirely up to yourself. The length of the handle, the shape of it, entirely up to yourself. Okay, that looks great. We just need to let this set up for a couple of hours. In the meantime, let's start our second project. Okay, let's have a look at the original lure. This one's about 3.5 inches long, and that's the length we're going to make ours. Now, it's called a surface popper lure because that's the sound it makes as it's being pulled through the water. And what creates that sound is the shape of the mouth. It's cut at approximately 15 degrees, and then it has a slight concave shape. So what I've done, I'm using a small miter gauge in my bandsaw, and I've tilted it to 15 degrees, locked it in position, and I've measured 3.5 inches on our dowel, and we're using 3/4 of an inch dowel. You can use thicker dowel if you want a thicker lure. And we're just going to cut it at my pencil mark at 15 degrees to create that mouth. Okay, now we're just going to go to the bench and drill our eye holes and the holes for our screw eyes.
Yeah, you can buy dowels in any type of wood species, but if you buy them off the shelf, they tend to be poplar, which is just perfect. It's the exact right weight you need for a lure. It's not too light and not too heavy.
Okay, we have our dowel cut to 3.5 inches, and we have the 15-degree angle cut on one end, and that creates the mouth. What we need to do now is drill some holes where we attach screw eyes, and we'll attach our treble hooks to the screw eyes. We have one on either end of our dowel, and then we also need to drill eye holes. And these eye holes are 3/8 of an inch. So what I do is, it doesn't matter if the angle of the mouth is up or down. Halfway, I just make a mark, and you want to get it even. This is for placement of the eyes, and that tells me where to drill. Also, what I want to do, this is end grain, so it can be a little tricky to drill into. The bit wants to wander. I'm just going to start it with a dowel, being careful not to slip and poke yourself. And on the end of our lure, that one goes in the center. On the mouth of our lure, it goes towards the top, not in the center. Now I'm reusing a jig here. This is a jig I used for the foosball table in the project I made in season 1. It helps me clamp the dowel. You just need to hold it steady so you can drill in the end grain. I'm using the scrap piece we had, the cut-off piece left over from our original cut, and that way I apply pressure on it, and when I start drilling in, this won't move on me. So you just want to go slow. You want to go as deep as possible. We're going to be putting some epoxy in there later for the screw eyes. There we go. Just do the same thing to the end. Okay, now I'm using my V-block just to steady the dowel. And just on the bottom, we want to drill one. And this is where we'll attach some treble hooks. Again, I just want to take my awl, just start it so the bit doesn't wander. Just hold it steady. Be careful how far you go. You definitely don't want to blow out through the other side. Okay, now we're going to drill the eye holes. It's no hard and fast rule. I just want about 1/2 inch from the mouth. And this is why we've left the dowel in its original shape. It's easier to drill the holes. Later on, we're going to taper the lure. It'd be too difficult at that point. Okay. Put this in my jig just to hold it steady. Switch out to a 3/8 of an inch drill bit. That's just the size I'm using. You can make the eyes any size you want. You want to go in about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch deep. Turn it around, do the other eye. There we go. You can see how that's taking shape already. Okay, we're going about 1/2 inch deep. If you go too close to the mouth, you could split the dowel. All right, let's go to the sander and we'll start shaping our lure. Okay, now that we have all our holes drilled, we just need to shape our dowel. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the end of the belt sander and create a little concave on our mouth. And then I'm going to use the disc and belt sander to create the taper shape. And I want to bring it down so that the back end of it is about 1/4 inch. Okay, you turn the dust collector on, wearing eye protection, hearing protection. This can get a little loud. Let's get going. There we go. You can see how that's coming together. I'm just going to take some sandpaper, give this a final shaping. Well, this is coming along nicely. We have our lure shaped and sanded. Now we just need to add some color. Let's have a look at our original lure. What we're going to do is we're going to cover ours in a base coat of white, and then we're going to add a few more layers of color to create this look. We're even going to add scales, and I'll show you how to do that. First thing I need to do is move to a well-ventilated area and use our spray paint. Off-the-shelf spray paint, that's all we're using. Okay, let's get going. Okay, let me show you what I did. For timing's sake, I made up some samples. We have the lure we finished with, and then I have one that I covered in a base coat of white. We're just using off-the-shelf spray paint. Then, on the back of it, I sprayed gold. Once that was finished, what I did is a regular old pot scrubber. I bought this one at the dollar store, but it has these great scales on it. I unraveled it, covered the lure with it, and I held it tight, and then I applied my green paint over that, and when I took it off, it gave me a really nice scale effect. And then our end result, our perfect surface popper lure. What I did is I ordered some eyes from a supply house and I gave it a finished coat of polyurethane, added our treble hooks. That looks beautiful. Okay, let's go see how the landing net's doing in the form. Okay, I think this net has been in the form long enough. Moment of truth. Huh. There we go. Look at that. Start of a landing net. Okay, we're just going to clean it up with a hand plane and a card scraper, sand it a bit. I also have to trim down the handle. There we go. Okay, now that the net's off the form, I'm just going to use the bandsaw to trim and clean up the handle. Before I completely finish the net, I need to route a groove along it. And what that does, that basically countersinks the thread we're going to use for the netting material. This is it. So it'll just lay in that groove. That way it doesn't catch on anything. there we go. You can see how that works. It just hides it in there nicely. Okay, we're going to go finish sanding this, and then we need to drill some holes so we can attach our net. Yeah, the net I made and the form I made, I just did that. That was just my own design. You can buy templates for it. You can make it smaller. You can make it larger. You can make it a different type of shape netting if you want. You can buy traditional netting for the material. I use sort of a latex material for mine. I mean, it's endless, really. You could really make it your own. I went ahead and I did a little more sanding and shaping of the net. I also added on the blue tape that had my drill holes marked out. They're all evenly spaced. I put an 1/8 inch bit in the driver. Just going to go ahead and drill those holes. Okay, that looks great. I think we're ready to attach our net. Okay, I went ahead and I attached the net, and I bought this netting at an online supply store, the same place where I got the treble hooks and the eyes. And I attached it with some mason twine that I bought at my local hardware store. I just went in and I tied it on with one knot, and I secured that knot in place with some crazy glue. You could use nail polish. And then I just went in and out of all the holes until I had the thing completely strung up. All right, I left this natural. You can finish it with a polyurethane. I think it looks great. Well, I think these projects turned out really well. We have our surface popper, our landing net. I think I'm ready to go try and catch some dinner. As usual, I had a blast making these projects with you. I hope you come back and see what we're building next here in the garage.
Said, hey, how are you? It's been a long, long time. I just found your number, thought I'd drop you a line. You know I've been out on this road such a long, long time. Just wanted to let you know I'm doing just fine. But hey, I'm doing fine out here on the road. As long as I have friends to call, I'm never alone. Folks wonder how I take all that driving all the time. As long as I have friends to call, I'm doing just fine. Said, hey, did I wake you? I'm sorry if I did. I just can't stay awake on this leg of the trip.